Hello, my name is Catherine Amraño and today we are going to talk about English language teaching materials for the course named Materials Design for Face-to-Face Environments. English language teaching is an increasing need, so today there are many authors researching and writing about methods, approaches, strategies, and more in order to improving the ways and results of teaching. In this process, an important look has been given to materials teaching. It is not only use activities or visual or audiovisual materials separately to get fun classes or motivate students, but design aquatic materials to do the above and achieve the learning aims. To design English language teaching materials is necessary to take into account some aspects to be used for teaching in the learning teaching process. For instance, before two students have contact with the authentic use of the language, help to discover the features of authentic input, provide opportunity to use the language to achieve communicative purpose, provide opportunities for outcome feedback to achieve impact in the sense that they arouse and sustain the learner's curiosity and attention, and simulate intellectual, static, and emotional environments. Today, it needs to develop flexible frameworks to help producing effective materials for target learners in principled and coherent ways, because these help teachers to develop materials quickly and effectively. Tomlinson proposed 15 principles for materials development. Here are some principles of language acquisition which teachers can follow when developing materials, so you can evaluate their validity and usefulness and apply some of them thinking in their own experience and the future of the population to be applied. First principle: a prerequisite for language acquisition is that the learners are exposed to a rich, meaningful, and comprehensible input of language in use. The learners need a lot of experience of the language being used in a variety of different ways and also need to experience particular language items and features many times in meaningful and comprehensible input in order to eventually acquire them to elaborate awareness needed for eventual acquisition. In these principles, materials developed must be materials with a lot of spoken and writing text. The language is authentic. It represents how the language is typically used. The language input is contextualized, that is to say, use it in relation to its context, and the learners are exposed to sufficient samples of language in authentic use. The third one, in order for the learners to maximize their exposure to language in use, they need to be engaged both effectively and cognitively in the language experience. If the learners don't feel any emotion with exposed to language in the use, they are unlikely to acquire anything from their experience. Feeling enjoyment, pleasure, and happiness, feeling empathy, being amused, being excited, and being stimulated are most likely to influence acquisition positively. In this principle, materials developed must prioritize the potential for engagement, use the activities which get the learners to think about what they are reading or listening, and use of activities which get learners to think and feel using the target language for communication. The third one, language learners who achieve positive affect are much more likely to achieve communicative competence than those who do not. Language learners need to be positive about the target language, their learning environment, teachers, and learning materials to achieve positive self-esteem. positive emotions seem to be the most useful in relation to language. In this principle, tests and tasks are interesting, relevant, and enjoyable. Set up achievable challenges which help to raise the learner's self-esteem and simulate emotive responses through the use of music, song, literature, art, etc. Fifth principle is second language learner can benefit from using those mental resources which they typically utilize when acquiring and using their first language. Multidimensional representation of language experienced and used can enrich the learning process in ways which promote durable acquisition. Second language users rarely use a second language inner voice until they reach an advanced level, so the use of an second language inner voice and get a visual imaging at lower levels can enhance second language performance and can be facilitated by teachers and materials. In this principle, some materials can be activities which get learners to visualize and/or use inner speech before, during, and after experiencing a reading or spoken test or using language themselves, and activities which help the learners to reflect on their mental activity. Language learners can benefit from noticing silent features of the input. If learners notice for themselves how a particular language item or feature is used, they are more likely to develop their language awareness. Principle of material development. From the experience they learn implicitly without focusing conscious attention on any particular feature of the experience. Later they revisit and reflect on their experience and pay conscious attention to features of in it in order to achieve explicit learning. Help the learners, preferably in collaboration, to make discoveries for themselves. Seventh principle: learners need opportunities to use language to try to achieve communicative purposes. If they are participating in interaction, they are also being pushed to clarify and elaborate, and they are also likely to elicit meaningful and comprehensible input from their interlocutors. Principles of materials development provide opportunities to produce language in order to achieve intended outcomes. Output activities designed so that the learners are using language, not specific features of it. Design output activities to develop the ability to communicate fluently, accurately, appropriately, and effectively.